Hey guys, tonight we wander through a city that never quite goes dark, even though it desperately wants to sleep. You're standing beneath a halo of gaslight, the flame flickering inside its glass globe, painting the fog a jaundiced gold, while carriage wheels hiss over damp cobblestones. The air smells faintly of coal smoke and horse sweat, and somewhere a factory whistle has only just stopped screaming, as if the Industrial Revolution forgot to check the time. You'd think exhaustion would knock you flat. Instead, your eyes are wide open, fixed on a cracked plaster ceiling you can't see from here but already dread. You probably won't survive this, by which I mean you probably won't survive a full Victorian night without questioning every life choice that led you to drink tea at 9 p.m. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me your location and local time. I'd love to know who else is awake with you in this strange little global insomnia club. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge home through a London that feels permanently over-caffeinated. By the mid-19th century, cities like London had exploded in size. Its population passed 2 million by the 1850s, a mainstream historical fact that would have made medieval villagers faint politely into their turnips. All those bodies mean noise, and all that industry means light. Gas lamps, introduced widely in the early 1800s, extend the day in a way your circadian rhythm never agreed to. Historians still argue whether the rapid spread of artificial lighting directly worsened sleep quality, or whether Victorians simply complained more loudly in print. But either way, you're the one staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m. Your bedroom is stuffy. The wallpaper peels slightly at the corner, patterned with earnest little flowers that look wide awake. Heavy drapes trap in the smell of soot. Outside, a hansom cab rattles by because apparently no one in 1853 believes in quiet hours. You lie there in a long cotton nightshirt, listening to the house settle, and your brain begins its nightly dramatic monologue. Did you send that letter correctly? Did you offend Aunt Margaret by declining her boiled eel pie? Is your moral character sufficiently robust? Victorian insomnia isn't just about noise, it's about nerves. The 19th century is obsessed with something called nervous exhaustion, later nicknamed neurasthenia. Though the term becomes especially popular toward the end of the century, the idea is already simmering. Modern life is frying your delicate inner wiring. Railways shriek across the countryside at previously unthinkable speeds, 30 miles per hour, which feels to you like a flirtation with death. Your brain, poor thing, hasn't evolved for this. At least that's what your doctor says while adjusting his sideburns. And then there's the moral layer. You're told that overstimulation, too much reading, too much thinking, too much excitement can inflame the mind at night. Novels are suspect. Late suppers are suspicious. Even ambition might keep you awake. Imagine being told your career goals are personally responsible for your under-eye circles. 3 cheers for progress. You roll onto your side. The mattress is stuffed with horsehair, which sounds quaint until one of the hairs pokes you like a Victorian passive-aggressive comment. You fluff the pillow, releasing a faint puff of dust that glitters in the gaslight sneaking under the door. Somewhere in the building, someone coughs, a deep, coal-seasoned cough. Industrial smog isn't just a daytime inconvenience. London's infamous pea soup fogs, thickened by pollution, creep indoors, bringing with them a faint metallic tang. Breathing feels like sipping lukewarm chimney. Doctors of the era often insist that bad air is the enemy. Miasma theory, the belief that disease spreads through foul smells, still holds sway for much of the century. While germ theory will gain ground later thanks to figures like Louis Pasteur, for now you're told that stagnant air corrupts both body and mind. So, if you can't sleep, clearly your bedroom atmosphere is plotting against you. You sit up. The room tilts slightly in the low light. Your candle trembles in its holder, as if also anxious about tomorrow's laundry.
You pad to the window and crack it open an inch. A slice of cool night air slips in, carrying distant laughter from a tavern and the rhythmic clop of hooves. Fresh air is about to become your new personality trait. But before we fling that window wide in Section 2, linger here in the half-dark, because insomnia in the Victorian age is not rare. Diaries and letters mention restless nights with surprising frequency. One quirky tidbit, some people believe that sleeping with your head pointed north could disturb your natural magnetic alignment thanks to the Earth's magnetic field. Yes, your pillow placement might be at war with the planet itself. Rearranging the bed becomes a small domestic drama, complete with grunting and mild existential dread. You lie back down and count the ticks of the mantel clock. Tick, tick, tick. It's steady, relentless. Time feels louder at night, as if it has nothing better to do than narrate your failure to drift off. The Victorians are obsessed with timekeeping, factory whistles, train schedules, synchronized clocks. For the first time, huge populations live by the minute hand. Your body, once guided by sunrise and sunset, now answers to a timetable. Historians still argue whether this regimentation fractured older, more flexible sleep patterns, like segmented first and second sleep that earlier generations practiced, but you suspect your ancestors napped more gracefully than you. You tried deep breathing, though no one has branded it as such yet. Inhale coal-tinged air. Exhale doubt. Inhale, exhale. Your thoughts scuttle like mice in the wainscoting. What if you never sleep again? What if tomorrow you accidentally address your boss as mother? The mind at midnight is not a reliable narrator. Outside, the gas lights hiss softly. They're beautiful, honestly, tiny captive suns lining the street. But they symbolize something larger, a world that refuses to dim. Productivity stretches longer. Social calls creep later. Even newspapers print evening editions. Darkness used to be a boundary. Now it's more of a suggestion. You flip the pillow to the cooler side, a universal human ritual that transcends centuries. Congratulations, you've invented the Victorian version of adjusting your sleep app. Somewhere, a cat yowls like it's auditioning for Gothic opera. You briefly consider blaming the moon. Plenty of people do. Lunar cycles are whispered about in drawing rooms, as if the moon personally files complaints against your REM cycle. Yet beneath the superstition and smog, there's something understandable: change. You are living through one of the fastest transformations in human history. New machines, new cities, new expectations. Your brain hums like the telegraph wires outside. It's no wonder sleep feels elusive. Still, you're not alone in this dim room. Across London and Manchester and Birmingham, thousands lie awake with you, staring at ceilings, listening to clocks, wondering if tomorrow's fog will feel lighter. Some will reach for laudanum eventually. Others will seek out country air or cold baths. But tonight, in this first restless chapter, you simply breathe. The window remains slightly open. The night air brushes your cheek, cooler now, carrying a hint of damp stone and distant river. Your eyelids grow marginally heavier, not because the world has quieted, but because you're beginning to accept its noise. Insomnia, you realize, is as much about wrestling control as it is about counting sheep. And somewhere between the ticking clock and the fading hoofbeats, you hover on that delicate edge, neither fully awake nor fully asleep, suspended in a gaslit world that refuses to switch off.
The window you cracked open last night is no longer a timid gesture. Tonight, you push it higher, the sash creaking in mild protest, as if even the house thinks you've gone a bit radical. A ribbon of cool air slips in, brushing your face with the faint scent of damp brick and distant chimney smoke. You inhale like someone who has just discovered oxygen is, in fact, free. If Victorian doctors had a favorite hobby, it might be prescribing fresh air with the confidence of someone handing out miracle coupons. You shuffle back to bed, but this time you do something scandalous. You loosen your clothing. Corsets, stays, tight waistcoats, Victorian fashion has been hugging your organs like an overenthusiastic aunt. There's a growing medical murmur that compressing the torso all day might not be ideal for breathing. One mainstream historical fact: physicians throughout the 19th century increasingly warned women about the dangers of tight lacing corsets, arguing they restricted lung capacity and displaced internal organs. The image of fainting ladies isn't just melodrama. Sometimes it's oxygen deprivation in a lace cage. So tonight, you untie. Laces slacken, buttons open, the body expands with a quiet sigh. You didn't realize how shallow your breaths were until your ribs get a little elbow room. Historians still argue whether doctors' critiques of corsets were purely medical or partly moral. Anxieties about fashion, vanity, and women's independence often sneak into the diagnosis, but either way, your lungs are grateful. The idea is simple. Stale air breeds illness and agitation. Fresh air soothes. Remember miasma theory from last night? If bad smells cause disease, then good, clean air must be the antidote. Even as germ theory edges into scientific conversation later in the century, the cultural faith in ventilation remains strong. You're told to air out your rooms daily. Bedding is hung near windows. Curtains are drawn back like theater drapes for the grand performance of oxygen. You imagine your bedroom as a kind of aquarium, except instead of tropical fish, you're housing a slightly frazzled Victorian human. Without airflow, you marinate in your own carbon dioxide. Delightful. So you rearrange the space. The bed is nudged closer to the window. The heavy velvet drapes, beautiful, dramatic, absolute air hoarders, are tied back. The wallpaper flowers seem less judgmental in the draft. There's even advice circulating in household manuals. Sleep with the window open year-round if you dare. In winter, this means you wake with frost edging the inside of the glass and your nose feeling like a decorative icicle. But many believe the chill is bracing, morally fortifying. You're not just ventilating, you're building character. A quirky tidbit floats through your mind. Some Victorians believed that night air was actually more beneficial than day air because it was less disturbed by human activity. The logic is charmingly vague, but you can almost picture the air settling into a calmer mood after sunset, like it too is tired of the factories. You stand by the window and let it brush your face. It feels cleaner, or maybe that's just hope. You slide back under the blankets. The sheets are cool now, kissed by the draft. There's something undeniably soothing about it. The body likes temperature drops at night. Modern sleep science will later confirm that a slightly cooler environment supports deeper sleep. The Victorians don't have sleep labs, but they do have common sense and a lot of anecdotal enthusiasm. If your room feels like a bakery oven, perhaps that's not ideal for dreaming about pastoral meadows. Down the street, you hear a neighbor coughing less tonight. Perhaps they've opened their windows too. A silent, drafty rebellion is underway. Entire terraces of houses, sashes lifted in unison, like a choir inhaling together. It's almost poetic, if poetry smelled faintly of coal. Of course, not everyone agrees. There are whispers that night air might be dangerous, especially in marshy areas where malaria once lurked. The word itself comes from mal-area, bad air. So you're caught between two schools of thought. Open the window and invite health, or open the window and invite invisible doom. Historians still argue whether these contradictory beliefs caused more anxiety than relief, but tonight you're choosing the breeze. You experiment. You prop the door slightly ajar to encourage cross-ventilation. Suddenly you're an amateur architect. High ceilings, another Victorian hallmark, help hot air rise. Wealthier homes boast transom windows above doors, designed specifically to keep air circulating even when privacy is required. The bedroom becomes a small engineering project. Who needs a sleep app when you have physics? You lie there listening to the gentle flutter of curtains. The fabric whispers against itself, a soft shh that almost sounds like encouragement. You imagine your brain cooling down, like a steam engine finally released from duty. The day's worries, letters, factory schedules, Aunt Margaret's eel pie drift outward through the open window, evaporating into the night. There's also a subtle shift in psychology.
Opening a window feels like agency. You can't stop the Industrial Revolution. You can't silence every carriage, but you can lift a latch. You can invite the sky into your room. It's a small rebellion against the claustrophobia of modern life. And yes, you do briefly worry about burglars. Fresh air is delightful, fresh thieves less so. You compromise by wedging the window just wide enough for a breeze, but not a full-grown pickpocket. Practicality remains undefeated. Another light joke flits through your half-sleepy mind. If fresh air truly cures everything, Victorian doctors would have prescribed standing dramatically on a cliff for every ailment, from hiccups to heartbreak. And honestly, give them time. As the minutes pass, your breathing deepens. The room feels larger somehow, boundaries softened by the moving air. The ticking clock from last night seems less accusatory. Time continues, but it no longer feels like it is tapping you on the shoulder, demanding performance. The draft cools your forehead, and you realize your thoughts have slowed from frantic squirrels to mildly distracted pigeons. There's a deeper belief at work here, too, that nature corrects what modernity disturbs. Fresh air isn't just oxygen, it's purity, simplicity, countryside virtue sneaking into the city. Even if you're still surrounded by brick and soot, the breeze carries a hint of fields you may never see. It suggests that somewhere beyond the gaslights, the world is quiet and green. Your eyelids droop. The night air hums gently around you. A carriage passes, but it sounds farther away, muffled by distance and drowsiness. You feel the faintest thread of sleep tugging at you, not yanking, just suggesting. Maybe the cure isn't dramatic. Maybe it's this: a loosened corset, a lifted sash, a small surrender to the sky. The curtain flutters once more, brushing the bedpost like a soft goodnight. You breathe in, slow and steady, and let the coolness settle into your bones.
The next logical step, once you've flung open every window you legally own, is to leave the city altogether. Because if a cracked sash brings relief, surely an entire coastline will fix you permanently. That, at least, is what the railway posters promise, their bold lettering practically shouting, "Sea air, restoration, moral improvement," probably. You find yourself at a bustling station, steam billowing like a dragon that's taken up civil service. The platform smells of coal and damp wool. By the mid-19th century, Britain's railway network has expanded at astonishing speed, a mainstream historical fact that still feels surreal as you watch locomotives stitch the countryside together. In the 1840s alone, thousands of miles of track are laid during what historians call railway mania. Fortunes are made, lost, and occasionally misplaced under piles of gravel. You board a third-class carriage, wooden benches, no cushions, character-building levels of comfort. The train lurches forward, and suddenly you're hurtling toward the coast at speeds your medieval ancestors would classify as witchcraft. Fields blur past. Sheep look mildly offended. Your heart thumps in rhythm with the wheels. There's something thrilling about it, but also something exhausting. Modernity doesn't stroll, it accelerates. Yet you're chasing something ancient, wind off the sea. Doctors widely recommend seaside retreats for a variety of ailments: melancholia, nervous disorders, insomnia. The belief is that bracing salt air strengthens the lungs and steadies the mind. Towns like Brighton blossom into fashionable resorts, their piers and promenades filling with urban refugees seeking restoration. Historians still argue whether the health benefits came from the mineral-rich air itself or simply from escaping grimy cities and relentless work schedules. But as the train whistles toward the horizon, you're willing to credit Poseidon personally. You arrive to the cry of gulls and the rhythmic crash of waves. The air hits you differently here, sharp, clean, edged with salt. It feels almost drinkable. You inhale deeply, as if trying to store it in jars for later. Your city lungs, accustomed to soot, expand in confused delight. The Victorian seaside isn't just about lounging, it's therapeutic theater.
You stroll along the promenade, coat flapping in the wind, pretending you're in a painting titled "Person Reclaiming Sanity." Bathing machines line the shore, those curious wooden huts on wheels that allow modest swimmers to enter the sea without scandalizing the entire British Empire. A quirky tidbit: attendants sometimes push these machines directly into the surf so bathers can slip discreetly into the water. Nothing says relaxation like being wheeled into the ocean in a glorified shed. Cold seawater immersion becomes another recommended cure. You wade in, gasp as the chill clamps onto your ankles, then your knees. The shock is electric. Your breath leaves you in a dramatic puff. For a moment, insomnia is the least of your concerns because you were busy not screaming. Advocates claim the cold invigorates circulation and strengthens the nerves. Modern science might nod cautiously at the mood-boosting effects of cold exposure, though it would probably prefer you not to be dunked by a man named Gerald with a firm grip and limited patience. After your bracing dip, you wrap yourself in towels and sit facing the horizon. The sea moves in steady, hypnotic rhythm. Unlike the ticking clock in your bedroom, this sound doesn't accuse, it soothes. Waves don't care about factory whistles or unanswered letters. They just arrive and retreat endlessly. You take long walks along the cliffs, the wind tangling your hair and scrubbing your thoughts clean. Evening arrives gently here. Gaslight feels distant, unnecessary. The sunset paints the water in molten gold, then lavender. You realize how rarely you've watched the sky change without interruption. In the city, even twilight competes with lamps and smoke. There's also a social element to seaside cures. You dine earlier, stroll longer, converse lazily. Without the dense press of urban obligations, your mind unwinds. Sleep begins to seem less like a battle and more like an inevitability. Of course, not everyone is convinced. Some critics mutter that seaside tourism is more fashion than medicine. Historians still argue whether the explosion of coastal resorts reflects genuine therapeutic success or clever marketing amplified by railway accessibility. But when you lie down in your rented seaside room, windows flung open to the roar of the tide, you feel something shift. The bed is simple. The sheets smell faintly of starch and salt. The breeze moves freely, unburdened by coal dust. You listen to the waves instead of carriage wheels. Your body, used to bracing against city noise, begins to soften. There's a light joke to be made here. If Victorian doctors could prescribe dramatic seaside brooding for heartbreak, they absolutely would. In fairness, it works suspiciously well. You close your eyes. The sea continues its patient breathing. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. Your thoughts try to flare up. Did I pack properly? Will the train return on schedule? But the rhythm pulls them under. Even your internal monologue seems embarrassed to interrupt the ocean. Somewhere down the beach, a lantern flickers near a late walker. The wind carries faint laughter, but it dissolves quickly into the vastness. Compared to the city, everything feels spaced out, diluted. Your mind follows suit. For the first time in a while, you don't feel chased by time. There's no ticking mantle clock, no factory whistle looming at dawn. Just the tide, which keeps its own ancient schedule and refuses to rush for anyone. You roll onto your side, listening. The pillow is cool, the air is honest, and as the waves fold into one another in the dark, you drift, not dramatically, not triumphantly, but quietly into a sleep that smells faintly of salt and possibility.
The sea air works its gentle magic, but of course the Victorians, being incapable of leaving well enough alone, decide that if a little water helps, then an aggressive amount of water must help spectacularly. And so you find yourself introduced to hydropathy, the water cure, where sleep is coaxed not by whispers of waves, but by strategic soaking. You arrive at a hydropathic establishment tucked into rolling countryside, a building that looks part spa, part boarding school, part place where you might be politely wrapped like leftovers. Hydropathy rises to popularity in the 19th century, inspired largely by the Austrian farmer-turned-healer Vincenz Prisnitz. By the 1840s and 1850s, water cure clinics flourish across Britain and America, a mainstream historical fact that sounds far more serene than the reality of what they do to you. The premise is straightforward. Water, applied in various temperatures and forms, stimulates circulation, calms the nerves, and restores balance. For insomnia, this means cold baths, wet sheet maps, and something ominously referred to as the dripping sheet. You are led to a tiled room where a tub waits, filled with water that looks deeply committed to being cold. The attendant smiles with unsettling cheerfulness. You step in. The shock is immediate. Your breath leaps out of your lungs as if trying to escape independently. Every nerve ending lights up like a telegraph wire in a thunderstorm. For a split second, you forget your name, your address, and your Aunt Margaret's eel pie. You are simply a mammal reconsidering its life decisions. Advocates insist that this cold immersion strengthens the nervous system and improves sleep by resetting overstimulated minds. Modern science might cautiously agree that cold exposure can influence stress hormones and circulation, but the Victorian version tends to skip the part where you ease into it gently. You are plunged with enthusiasm. After the bath comes the wrap. You are swaddled tightly in a sheet soaked in cold water, then bundled in blankets to trap warmth as your body reheats itself. It feels like being gift-wrapped by someone who cares deeply about your well-being, but not at all about your comfort. The idea is that the body's reaction, warming itself, increasing circulation, promotes detoxification and tranquility. Historians still argue whether hydropathy's reported successes stemmed from the water treatments themselves or from the overall regimen: early rising, simple diets, fresh country air, regular exercise, and strict schedules. Because yes, alongside the dramatic baths, you're also eating porridge, walking outdoors, and going to bed at an hour that doesn't flirt with midnight. There's a quirky tidbit whispered in corridors. Some establishments use alternating hot and cold showers, believing the rapid temperature changes jolt the body into a new state of balance. It's essentially Victorian contrast therapy, minus the Instagram caption about resilience. You endure another treatment called the rain bath, where water trickles from above in a steady stream. It's less violent than the plunge, more meditative. The steady patter becomes almost hypnotic. You close your eyes and imagine yourself back by the sea, except indoors and supervised. Between treatments, you walk in the gardens. Gravel crunches underfoot. Pine trees scent the air. Unlike the urban parks you pace back home, this landscape feels curated for calm. There's a schedule pinned in the hallway. Rise at 6, cold bath, breakfast, walk, rest, wrap, supper, bed. Your insomnia, once a chaotic tangle of thoughts, is being marched into formation. And here's the subtle genius: structure itself can soothe. When your days are predictable, your nights may follow. The Victorians frame it as balancing humors or strengthening nerves, but you sense that routine is the quiet hero. Of course, not everyone is convinced. Critics claim hydropathy is theatrical nonsense, cold water bravado masquerading the science. Yet testimonials pour in. People swear they sleep better after a week of wraps and plunges. Whether it's the hydrotherapy, the countryside, or the placebo effect dressed in damp linen, relief feels real enough to you. One evening, after a final brisk sponge bath, you slip into bed at the clinic. The mattress is firm but clean. The window is open, of course it is, and cool night air drifts across your freshly tingling skin. Your body feels heavy in a pleasant way, like a clock that has finally been wound correctly. You notice something different tonight. Instead of wrestling with your thoughts, you feel physically tired. The cold baths have drained your restless energy. Even your mind seems less inclined to stage dramatic reenactments of social missteps. You chuckle softly to yourself. If insomnia is a stubborn houseguest, hydropathy is the Victorian equivalent of tossing a bucket of water on it and saying, "Out!"
As you lie there, wrapped not in wet sheets but in dry blankets, you reflect on the curious blend of discipline and drama that defines this cure. There's something almost ritualistic about it, an ordeal followed by release, the body shocked, then soothed. Outside, wind rustles through the trees. No carriage wheels, no factory whistles, just the occasional owl expressing mild professional satisfaction. Your breathing slows, muscles unclench. The day's cold plunges feel distant now, replaced by a spreading warmth that seeps from your core to your fingertips. The schedule, the air, the water have conspired gently in your favor. You drift closer to sleep, aware that tomorrow will begin with another bracing dip. Oddly, the anticipation doesn't trouble you, it anchors you. There's comfort in knowing what comes next. And as consciousness thins, you realize that Victorian insomnia cures aren't always about coaxing the mind directly. Sometimes they overwhelm the body into surrender. Sometimes they rearrange your habits so thoroughly that sleep slips in unnoticed. The last thing you hear is the faint whisper of wind against the window frame, steady and reassuring, like water flowing over stone.
Back in your own bedroom, whether in the city or the countryside, you now approach sleep like a hopeful amateur chemist. You've aired the room, braved the sea, survived the cold bath. What remains are the quieter rituals, the small domestic spells stitched together from herbs, habit, and just a dash of wishful thinking. On your bedside table sits a small sachet, neatly sewn and faintly purple, lavender. By the Victorian era, lavender is widely associated with calm and cleanliness, often tucked into pillows and linens to freshen both scent and spirit, a mainstream historical fact that feels comfortingly familiar even now. You lift the pillow and give the sachet a gentle squeeze. The fragrance rises softly, floral and slightly sweet, like a garden that has decided to whisper instead of bloom. You lie back and inhale. It's not dramatic. There's no icy plunge, no crashing wave, just a quiet suggestion that your mind might consider, perhaps, taking the evening off. Victorian households are full of these small sleep charms. Hops, yes, the same plant used in brewing beer, are sometimes stuffed into pillows, believed to have sedative qualities. A quirky tidbit: hop-filled pillows are recommended in various household guides for restless sleepers. You briefly wonder if your head now smells faintly like a polite tavern. On the mantel, the clock ticks steadily, but tonight, instead of glaring at it as your mortal enemy, you let it become a metronome. Tick, pause, tick. You match your breathing to it. Slow in, slow out. There's something grounding about rhythm. Even in the 19th century, before white noise machines and sleep playlists, people understand that steady sound can anchor a wandering mind. Warm milk makes its appearance too. Heated gently, sipped from a simple ceramic cup, it coats your throat with a mild, creamy comfort. Victorians often recommend light suppers and simple evening fare for better digestion and sleep. Heavy meals are thought to overstimulate the system. Historians still argue whether these dietary cautions stem from genuine physiological observation or from broader moral ideas about restraint and self-control, but you're not about to debate philosophy with a cup of milk in your hand. You blow out the candle. Darkness gathers fully now, softened by the faint street glow sneaking around the curtains. Your body feels less like a battlefield and more like a guest room being gently prepared. There are other remedies whispered about too. Some suggest placing a small mirror under the pillow to reflect away bad dreams. Others recommend certain prayer routines or reading a few pages of improving literature. Not thrilling novels, mind you, but morally steady prose that won't set your imagination galloping. You smile faintly at the thought that even your choice of bedtime reading is under surveillance.
And then there are ticking watches placed deliberately near the bed. The sound, reminiscent of a heartbeat, is said to soothe like a cradle rhythm. It's strangely effective. The steady tick-tock becomes less a reminder of passing time and more a gentle proof that time continues without your supervision. You shift beneath the blankets. The sheets are cool from the open window, which you still leave slightly raised. That faithful ribbon of fresh air drifts in, carrying the faintest scent of night-blooming flowers from somewhere beyond your view. Your lungs fill easily now. The loosened clothing and lifted sash have become habits rather than experiments. One light joke drifts through your thoughts. If Victorians could patent Lavender Pillow 2.0, now with extra hope, they absolutely would. And yet, here you are, benefiting from the original model. You think about the larger pattern forming. Fresh air, sea air, cold water, herbs, simple food, gentle routine. None of it is flashy, none of it promises instant transformation, but together they nudge you toward equilibrium. Outside, a distant carriage rolls past, softer than before. The city still exists. Industry hasn't paused in your honor, but your relationship to it has shifted. Instead of fighting the noise, you've built a small sanctuary within it. Historians still argue whether Victorian insomnia was truly worse than in earlier centuries or simply more documented as literacy rose and personal diaries became common. But lying here now, that scholarly debate feels pleasantly distant. Your eyelids grow heavier. The scent of lavender lingers, subtle but steady. Your muscles loosen one by one. Jaw unclenches. Shoulders drop. The ticking clock no longer sounds like a countdown, but like a lullaby made of seconds. You drift toward that in-between space again, the threshold where thoughts blur at the edges. The room seems larger, softer. The open window lets in a cooler breeze, and it brushes your cheek like a quiet reassurance. You are allowed to rest. The rituals have done their quiet work, not by overpowering you, but by inviting you. Your breathing slows further. The milk warmth settles comfortably. The pillow cradles your head with faint botanical optimism. And now, as the night deepens and the world outside grows less insistent, everything in the room seems to exhale at once. The curtains hang still. The clock ticks on, patient and kind. The lavender scent fades into something barely perceptible, like a memory of a garden at dusk. You are no longer chasing sleep. You are simply meeting it halfway. The air moves gently across your face. Your thoughts dissolve into softer shapes, less defined, less demanding. The city's distant sounds blur into a low, steady hush. Even your own heartbeat seems slower, calmer. There is nothing left to fix tonight. No window to adjust, no bath to endure, no train to catch. Just the quiet room, the open sash, the faint perfume of herbs, and the steady rhythm of breath. You sink further, wrapped in blankets and a century's worth of hopeful remedies. The gaslights outside flicker on, unaware that you've finally slipped beyond their reach.
You would think that opening a window is daring enough, but the Victorians, once convinced that fresh air is the answer, do what humans always do when mildly successful. They escalate. Soon, it's not enough to crack a sash. You drag your entire sleeping arrangement outdoors. The open-air sleeping craze gathers momentum toward the late 19th and early 20th centuries, especially as fears about tuberculosis grow. A mainstream historical fact, doctors widely believe that abundant fresh air is one of the best defenses against tuberculosis, long before antibiotics exist. Sanatoriums are built in mountains and forests, designed around porches and verandas where patients rest bundled in blankets year-round. If air is medicine, then more air must be better. So you haul a narrow cot into the garden. It wobbles slightly on uneven ground. The grass is cool beneath your bare feet. Overhead, the sky stretches vast and unceilinged, scattered with indifferent stars. For someone used to plaster and wallpaper, the openness feels almost rebellious. You settle onto the cot, blankets piled high. The night presses close, not threatening, just immense. Crickets tune their tiny instruments. Leaves murmur softly. A faint breeze brushes your face, unfiltered by brick or chimney. There's something profoundly different about sleeping outside. Indoors, you battle stale air and ticking clocks. Out here, you negotiate with dew and distant owls. In wealthier households, rooftop sleeping platforms become fashionable. Urban homes convert flat roofs into makeshift night gardens, complete with canvas screens for modesty. It's essentially Victorian glamping, minus fairy lights and curated playlists. You imagine explaining to your ancestors that you're voluntarily sleeping on the roof in winter for health. They would nod gravely and assume you've joined a cult. And perhaps you have, in a way, the cult of oxygen. Historians still argue whether the open-air movement significantly improved health outcomes, or whether its benefits stemmed more from rest, nutrition, and structured care than from the air itself. But the cultural belief is powerful. Fresh air becomes synonymous with vitality, moral clarity, and even national strength. You pull the blankets tighter around your shoulders. The chill is sharper out here. Your breath clouds faintly. But beneath the cold is a strange comfort. The air feels alive, not trapped. It moves. It carries the scent of damp earth and distant wood smoke. There's a quirky tidbit whispered among enthusiasts. Some claim that sleeping under the stars improves dreams, as if the subconscious performs better with better ventilation. No formal studies, just confident anecdote. You briefly wonder if your dreams will now feature heroic shepherds instead of overdue bills. A light joke drifts through your mind. If insomnia follows you out here, at least you'll have better scenery while suffering. You listen. Without walls, sounds stretch differently. A dog barks far away. An owl calls once, deliberate and unimpressed. The wind moves through hedges in slow waves. None of it feels intrusive. It's not the abrupt clang of factory metal or the sharp rattle of carriage wheels. It's layered, organic. You shift on the cot. It creaks in mild protest. Comfort is negotiable, clearly. The mattress is thinner than your indoor one. A small pebble presses insistently through the canvas beneath you. You adjust, because resilience is apparently part of the therapy. Open-air schools for children adopt similar principles, holding classes outside even in colder months. The belief is that bracing air strengthens young bodies and sharpens minds. You imagine rows of bundled students reciting lessons while their breath fogs dramatically. Education, but make it frosty. The temperature continues to drop. You're grateful for the heavy wool blankets, layered like geological strata. Your nose is cold. Your toes consider filing a complaint. But your lungs feel expansive. Each breath is crisp and clean. You realize something subtle. Out here, you can't control everything. Indoors, you adjust curtains, pillows, lamps. Out here, you surrender more fully. The sky will do as it pleases. The wind decides its own tempo. There's relief in that surrender. Another light joke floats up. If a burglar appears, at least you'll already be outside, saving them the trouble. But beneath the humor is something steady. Your thoughts don't ricochet as sharply. They rise and fall like the breeze. There's less sense of confinement. Even your worries seem smaller under this wide canopy. A cloud drifts across the moon, dimming the garden briefly. The darkness deepens, but it doesn't feel suffocating. It feels natural, like a curtain drawn by the world itself. You think back to your gaslit ceiling in Section 1, the way shadows pooled in corners. Out here, there are no corners, just open gradients of dark and silver. The open-air advocates insist that this kind of sleeping strengthens the constitution. It builds resilience. It restores balance. Whether that's physiological truth or Victorian optimism wrapped in wool, you can't say for certain. What you can say is this: your breath has slowed. The rhythm of insects replaces the tick of the clock. The wind replaces the hum of distant machinery. Your body cools gradually, signaling the brain that night has fully arrived. There's a moment, small but noticeable, when you realize you are no longer waiting for sleep. You are simply lying beneath the sky, part of the same air that moves through trees and across rooftops. No glass barrier, no stale enclosure. The cot creaks once more as you roll onto your side. The blankets cocoon you. The breeze brushes your ear like a quiet reassurance. And as the stars continue their patient watch overhead, you drift, not forced,
not shocked into submission by cold water, not perfumed into compliance by lavender, but eased downward by the steady, ancient movement of open night air.
By now, you've slept under the stars, braved the sea, and voluntarily turned yourself into a human tea bag in cold water. Naturally, the next step is to hand your entire schedule over to professionals who believe fresh air should be measured in quotas. You arrive at a sanatorium nestled among tall pines, the building long and symmetrical, all verandas and wide windows. The air smells like resin and damp earth. It's quiet in that deliberate way, like the trees signed an agreement to keep their voices low. Sanatoriums become especially associated with tuberculosis treatment in the late 19th century, a mainstream historical fact. Before antibiotics, rest and continuous exposure to fresh air were considered the most effective therapies for tuberculosis patients, particularly after German physician Hermann Bremer popularized the sanatorium model. Even those without TB, merely suffering from nervous exhaustion or chronic insomnia, sometimes find themselves admitted for structured rest cures. You're shown to a simple room with enormous windows that are, of course, already open. The bed is narrow but spotless. A wool blanket is folded with military precision. There is a schedule posted on the wall, and it does not ask for your opinion. Rise at 6. Light breakfast. 2 hours reclining outdoors. Short supervised walk. Midday rest. Evening meal. Bed by 9. You suddenly miss the chaos of your own insomnia. The philosophy here is relentless consistency. Fresh air is not an accessory, it is the main character. Patients recline on deck chairs lined up across verandas, wrapped in blankets even when frost clings to the railings. You join them, bundled so thoroughly you resemble a thoughtful burrito. The cold air brushes your face. Pine needles sway gently overhead. You are instructed to remain still. Rest is prescribed as seriously as medicine. No dramatic novels, no stimulating debates. Even conversation is kept mild, as if excitement might scare the oxygen away. Historians still argue whether the strict regimentation of sanatorium life contributed as much to patient recovery as the fresh air itself. Structure reduces stress. Predictability calms the mind. When every hour has a place, your thoughts have less room to spiral. You sit quietly, listening to wind moving through the trees. There is a faint murmur of other patients shifting in their chairs. Someone coughs softly. Not the harsh, coal-seasoned cough of the city, but a lighter, contained sound. Meals are simple. Porridge, bread, milk, broth. Nothing rich or excessive. The belief persists that heavy digestion interferes with rest and strains the system. A quirky tidbit, some sanatoriums carefully monitored patients' weight gain as a sign of recovery, equating sturdy flesh with resilience. You glance at your modest bowl of porridge and silently promise to cooperate. The discipline feels almost monastic. Bells signal transitions. You move as a group from veranda to dining hall to walking path. There is comfort in the collective rhythm. You are not alone in your sleeplessness anymore. You are part of a quiet assembly of breathers. A light joke flickers through your mind. If productivity is the god of the city, here the deity is oxygen, and you are a devout worshiper. Evenings arrive gently. By 9 o'clock, the building settles into hush. Windows remain open despite the chill. Blankets pile high. You slide beneath them, face tingling from hours outdoors. The pine scent lingers faintly in your hair. Your muscles feel pleasantly used from walking, but not strained. The day has unfolded without urgency. No telegraph messages, no factory whistles, no rooftop negotiations with burglars. You notice something remarkable. You are tired at the correct time. Not exhausted from battling thoughts at midnight, not wired from gaslight and worry, just evenly, predictably tired. There's debate among scholars about whether sanatoriums were as universally beneficial as advertised. Some critics argue that overcrowding and inconsistent medical standards undermine their promise. Others maintain that for many patients, especially those with early-stage tuberculosis, the rest and air model genuinely prolonged life. But for insomnia, the simple inability to quiet the mind, the combination of fresh air, routine, and reduced stimulation seems quietly effective. You lie on your back, staring at the faint outline of tree branches through the open window. The sky beyond is darker than the city ever allowed. Stars flicker between needles. The building creaks softly as it cools. Somewhere down the corridor, footsteps pad gently, then fade. No ticking clock dominates the room. Time here is measured in breaths and bells, not seconds. You turn onto your side. The mattress is firm but forgiving. The blanket weight presses reassuringly across your shoulders. Outside, wind stirs the pines again, a soft susurration that sounds almost like distant waves. You remember the sea from Section 3, the way it breathed in and out. The forest has its own version of that rhythm.
Your thoughts attempt a small protest. What about tomorrow? What about responsibilities waiting beyond these trees? But the schedule has already answered those questions. Tomorrow will look much like today, and today has been manageable. Another light joke drifts by. Perhaps the ultimate Victorian insomnia cure is simply removing you from your own decisions. Your breathing slows, syncing with the wind. Inhale, exhale. The air is cool but not cruel. It slips into your lungs easily, without soot or stale confinement. For the first time in a long while, you feel aligned with the hour. Night has arrived, and so has sleep's quiet invitation. You don't chase it, you don't analyze it. You simply lie still beneath the open window, wrapped in pine-scented air and gentle discipline. And somewhere between the fading footfalls in the corridor and the whisper of trees beyond the veranda, you drift, steady, unhurried, carried not by shock or scent, but by the calm architecture of routine and the faithful presence of fresh air.
You leave the sanatorium with pine still clinging faintly to your coat, and although you don't take the entire veranda home with you, tempting as that may be, you do bring back one deceptively simple habit: the evening walk. The Victorians call it a constitutional, which sounds far more official than "I'm pacing because my brain won't shut up." A mainstream historical fact: regular walking is widely prescribed in the 19th century as a tonic for both physical and mental health, especially among the middle classes who suddenly have enough leisure time to stroll with purpose. Doctors recommend moderate exercise in fresh air to regulate digestion, circulation, and yes, sleep. So just before dusk, you step outside. The city hasn't changed. The factories still exhale their sooty sighs, gas lamps wait to flicker alive, but you are moving differently now, deliberately, steadily, without rushing toward anything. Your boots strike the pavement in a quiet rhythm. Step, step, step. The repetition is soothing. Unlike the train in Section 3, you control this pace. Your breath deepens naturally as you walk, cool air slipping into your lungs. Public parks, a relatively new urban phenomenon in the Victorian era, offer carefully curated slices of greenery amid brick and smoke. Hyde Park in London, for example, becomes a popular site for promenading. You follow gravel paths bordered by trees that look slightly disapproving but tolerant. Historians still argue whether the expansion of public parks was driven primarily by philanthropic concern for urban health or by a desire to impose moral order and discipline on crowded cities. Either way, the result is the same. You get somewhere to walk that isn't directly adjacent to a factory chimney. The sky shifts from gold to indigo. Street lamps spark one by one. There's something transitional about this hour, neither day nor night. Your thoughts, which tend to flare under artificial light, soften in the natural dimming. You pass other walkers, couples murmuring, a solitary gentleman with hands clasped behind his back, contemplating either poetry or unpaid bills, a nursemaid steering a pram. Everyone participating in this quiet communal unwinding. There's a quirky tidbit circulating in period advice manuals. Walking briskly before supper is said to shake loose stagnant thoughts. No anatomical explanation offered, just the confident suggestion that your worries might rattle out like loose change if you move enough. You try it. You pick up the pace slightly. Your arms swing. The day's irritations, letters unanswered, conversations replayed, begin to feel less sticky. Movement redistributes them. A light joke crosses your mind. If overthinking burned calories, Victorians would have invented competitive brooding by now. You loop around the park once more as twilight deepens. The air cools noticeably. This drop in temperature signals something primal in your body. Night is approaching. Prepare to rest. Modern sleep science will eventually confirm that exposure to natural light in the evening, followed by gradual darkness, helps regulate circadian rhythms. But you don't have lab studies. You have the sky. You leave the park and stroll down a quieter residential street. Windows glow softly. I glimpse silhouettes moving inside. Families at supper, someone reading by lamplight. Life continues, but it feels contained. Your footsteps echo less now. The rhythm of walking has settled into your muscles. Your breath remains steady, deeper than when you left home. Back inside your bedroom, you open the window as usual. The air feels cooler after your walk, your skin lightly flushed from movement. You change into nightclothes, loose, breathable. No corset negotiations tonight. There's a pleasant heaviness in your legs as you sit on the edge of the bed. Not exhaustion, just used energy. Your body feels accounted for. You blow out the candle and lie down. The open window admits a soft current of night air. It smells faintly of damp stone and distant gardens. Your mind attempts to resurrect its usual parade of concerns, but the images lack momentum. They feel like sketches instead of full theatrical productions. Historians still argue whether Victorian evening habits, earlier bedtimes, fewer electrified distractions, gave them an advantage in sleep compared to us. Yet they also face noise, smoke, and relentless social expectations. Perhaps the difference lies not in technology, but in ritual. The constitutional has become yours. You stretch your legs beneath the blanket. They hum faintly from the walk, a low physical reminder that you moved through the world rather than sitting beneath it. Outside, a carriage passes, but you barely register it.
Your breath matches the memory of your steps, slow, even. You think briefly of the sanatorium veranda, the pine-scented air, then of the seaside wind, then of that first gaslit ceiling from Section 1. The journey feels cumulative now, each remedy layered gently atop the last. Another light joke crosses your drowsy mind. Perhaps insomnia simply needed to be walked out like an impatient dog. Your eyelids grow heavier. The room remains softly ventilated. No dramatic interventions tonight. No cold plunges, no rooftop cots. Just a body that has spent its energy wisely, and a mind that has been given room to unwind. The last thing you notice before drifting is the faint echo of your own footsteps, remembered in muscle and breath.
Just when you think the Victorians have exhausted every possible interaction with air and water, someone rolls a humming contraption into the bedroom and declares that electricity will now be handling your insomnia. You stare at it skeptically. By the late 19th century, electricity has begun its slow, dramatic entrance into daily life. While large-scale electrical grids are still developing, experimental devices and personal electrotherapeutic gadgets become fashionable. A mainstream historical fact, small electrical devices, belts, brushes, battery-powered stimulators, are marketed widely in the 1880s and 1890s as cures for everything from nervous exhaustion to headaches. Naturally, insomnia joins the list. You are introduced to an electrical belt, which sounds heroic but looks like something halfway between medical equipment and ambitious tailoring. The theory is that mild electrical currents stimulate weakened nerves and restore balance to your frazzled system. Nervous exhaustion, remember, is the villain of the age. If your nerves are too slack or too strained, perhaps they simply need charging. You fasten the belt around your waist. There is a faint metallic scent, like coins and optimism. A small battery unit clicks. Then, buzz. It's not painful, more like a persistent tingle, as if your skin is hosting a polite swarm of bees. The sensation is oddly distracted. Your mind, previously free to spiral into anxious monologues, now focuses on the tiny electrical pulses dancing along your midsection. Historians still argue whether these early electrotherapies had meaningful physiological effects, or whether their benefits were largely placebo, powered as much by belief in modern science as by current itself. Electricity, after all, represents progress. If steam and telegraphs transformed the world, surely a few volts could transform your bedtime. There are other gadgets too: magnetic pillows, electrified combs, hand-cranked generators that promise to reinvigorate the nerves. A quirky tidbit: some advertisements claim that electrical treatments can restore vital force, a concept that sounds suspiciously like Victorian branding for feeling less tired. You sit on the edge of your bed, belt gently buzzing, and reflect on how quickly the solutions have evolved. Fresh air was ancient and pastoral. Cold baths were elemental. But this feels modern, almost futuristic. A light joke flutters through your thoughts. If you glow faintly in the dark, at least you won't need a candle. You eventually switch the device off and slide beneath the blankets. The window remains open. Some habits persist even in the age of wires. The night air slips in as always, indifferent to innovation. There's something psychologically powerful about the hum of machinery. Even after you remove the belt, you almost imagine you can still feel it. A residual buzz in your awareness. The mind, given a new sensation, temporarily forgets its old anxieties. Electric lighting is also creeping into wealthier homes by the end of the century, though gas remains common for decades. Historians still argue whether electric light ultimately worsened insomnia by extending waking hours even further than gaslight had. The irony is almost poetic. The same force marketed to cure nervous disorders might be quietly fueling them. You lie back and consider the contrast. Outside, air moves through leaves with ancient patience. Inside, wires promise efficiency. Your breathing slows. The faint memory of electrical tingling lingers in your skin, but it fades beneath the cooler touch of night air. You realize that even the most modern contraption cannot fully override the body's rhythms. Still, there's comfort in experimentation. Trying something, anything, feels better than surrendering to sleeplessness. The Victorians are relentless tinkerers, convinced that progress can be engineered. You roll onto your side. The sheets are cool. The room is dim. No dramatic shocks, no seaside winds. Just a faint mechanical optimism humming in the background of your thoughts. Another light joke slips in. Perhaps insomnia is simply unimpressed by gadgets and prefers a nice walk. Your mind drifts back through the remedies. Lavender, cold plunges, rooftop cots, pine verandas. Each one speaks a different language. Nature, discipline, innovation. And here you are, balanced somewhere between breeze and battery. The window curtain stirs softly. The air carries a faint scent of rain. Your breathing steadies, less preoccupied now. Whether it was the belt's gentle distraction or the cumulative effect of every fresh air ritual you've adopted, something has shifted. You no longer approach bedtime as a battleground.
It has become a laboratory, sometimes absurd, occasionally electric, but ultimately patient. Outside, a distant lamp flickers. Inside, the last of the evening's tension dissolves. The gadgets will come and go. The advertisements will promise miracles, but the air continues its quiet work, slipping through your open window as faithfully as ever. And as you drift toward sleep, you suspect that even in an age obsessed with wires and currents, this simplest current, the one moving in and out of your lungs, remains the most reliable of all.
And then, of course, there is the small glass bottle on the bedside table. You've opened windows, you've walked at dusk, you've slept on rooftops and submitted to electricity like a mildly cooperative lightning rod. But now, your gaze rests on something quieter, darker. Laudanum. A mainstream historical fact. Laudanum, a tincture of opium dissolved in alcohol, was widely available throughout the 19th century and used for pain, coughs, anxiety, and insomnia. You didn't need a dramatic prescription. It sat behind pharmacy counters and sometimes right in household cabinets, as unremarkable as cough syrup. The liquid glows amber in the lamplight. Victorian doctors frequently prescribed opiates for sleeplessness, believing they calmed overactive nerves and soothed agitation. And they do, at least temporarily. The body, nudged chemically, relaxes its vigilance. Thoughts soften, edges blur. You lift the bottle, hesitate, then set it back down. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of laudanum was driven more by genuine therapeutic necessity or by limited alternatives in an era before modern pharmaceuticals. There were few effective treatments for chronic pain or severe anxiety. Opium filled that vacuum. You imagine taking a measured dose, a few drops into water, the faint bitter taste, the warmth spreading slowly through your limbs. The promise of oblivion, gentle, enveloping. There's a reason writers of the era, from poets to diarists, reference opium with a complicated mix of reverence and caution. It quiets the mind, yes, but it can also tether you to it. A quirky tidbit, some Victorian households kept soothing syrups for children that contained opiates in small amounts, marketed as remedies for fussiness or teething. The idea that infants once napped under the influence of opium is enough to make you blink at the bottle a little harder. You sit on the edge of your bed, the open window still admitting that faithful ribbon of cool air. The contrast feels stark. Fresh night breeze on one side, distilled poppy on the other. A light joke flickers through your thoughts. Perhaps insomnia is stubborn, but at least it doesn't come in a bottle. You place the laudanum further from reach, sliding it toward the back of the table. Not dramatic, just a small boundary. The candle flickers. You extinguish it. Darkness settles gently. Without chemical intervention, sleep may arrive more slowly, but it arrives with clarity. The body sinks of its own accord, not pushed. Your breathing finds its rhythm again. Inhale cool air, exhale warmth. The city hums faintly beyond the window, but it feels distant now. You have built layers between yourself and its urgency. Fresh air, routine, movement, restraint. The bottle remains unopened. Historians still debate the full impact of laudanum on Victorian health, whether it alleviated suffering more often than it created new burdens. But here, in this quiet room, the decision feels simple. You choose the breeze. Your eyelids grow heavier, not dramatically, not chemically, just gradually. The curtain stirs once more. The air slips across your cheek like a soft reminder that sleep can be invited, not compelled. And as the room cools and your thoughts dim, you drift, not under the weight of poppy and alcohol, but under the slow, faithful current of night itself.
You wake the next evening with a quiet sense of rearrangement, not just in habit, but in architecture. Because if fresh air is your ally, then your bedroom itself must become a collaborator. Victorian homes, especially among the middle and upper classes, begin to reflect growing concerns about ventilation and hygiene. A mainstream historical fact, By the mid to late 19th century, architectural reformers advocate for higher ceilings, larger windows, and improved airflow in response to fears about disease and bad air. The house is no longer just shelter, it is a breathing apparatus. You stand in your room and look up. The ceiling is tall, higher than practicality strictly demands. Heat rises, they say. Let it collect above you instead of around your pillow. The window, now habitually open, seems less like rebellion and more like design intention fulfilled. You pull the bed slightly away from the wall. Corners, some believe, trap stagnant air. Dust collects. Energy, whatever that vaguely means, lingers. You shake out the sheets and hang them briefly near the window, letting the cool dusk breeze slip through the fibers. There's a quiet satisfaction in this small ritual. You are preparing a climate, not just a bed. Feather mattresses, popular in many Victorian households, offer plush comfort but can trap heat. Some reform-minded voices suggest firmer bedding for better circulation and support. Historians still argue whether these recommendations stemmed from genuine ergonomic insight or from broader anxieties about indulgence and moral softness. Either way, you fluff your mattress with newfound scrutiny. A quirky tidbit circulates in household advice columns. Placing the bed so that morning light touches it early is believed to discourage dampness and promote health. Sunlight as disinfectant, long before ultraviolet theory becomes common knowledge. You adjust the curtains, choosing lighter fabric over heavy velvet. Yes, the dramatic drapes look impressive, but they hoard air like jealous gatekeepers. The lighter cloth moves more easily, responding to the faintest breeze. A light joke flits across your mind. Interior design, but make it respiratory. You consider the door as well. A slightly ajar door allows cross-ventilation. The air moves in subtle currents now, window to hallway, hallway to stairwell. You can almost feel the house exhale. The Victorian obsession with ventilation isn't entirely misplaced. Urban overcrowding and poor sanitation contribute to disease outbreaks earlier in the century. Reformers push for cleaner water systems, better sewage management, and improved building standards. While germ theory eventually clarifies many mysteries, the emphasis on airflow remains a cultural pillar. You light a candle briefly, observing how the flame bends toward the window. Proof of movement, proof that the room is not stagnant. Your pillow is plumped, lavender sachet tucked discreetly beneath it. The mantel clock remains, but you shift it slightly farther from the bed. Its ticking softens, no longer perched at your ear like a punctual critic. Outside, twilight settles gently. The air carries a faint coolness. You notice how differently the room feels now, less enclosed, more permeable. Historians still debate whether the Victorian drive toward hygienic architecture significantly improved sleep quality, or whether it primarily reduced infectious disease. But for you, the psychological effect is immediate. The room feels intentional. You lie down and stretch out fully. No corset, no constriction. The mattress supports rather than swallows. The air brushes your forehead in steady intervals. There's something empowering about shaping your environment instead of merely enduring it. Insomnia once felt like an external assault. Noise, smog, nerves. Now it feels negotiable. Another light joke drifts by. Perhaps the real cure was just moving the furniture all along. The house settles around you. Wood creaks softly as temperatures shift. But instead of interpreting these sounds as disturbances, you hear them as signs of a living structure adjusting. You inhale deeply. The air is cooler near the window, slightly warmer toward the center of the room, a subtle gradient. Your breathing syncs with it. The gas lights outside glow faintly, but their intrusion is softened by the lighter curtains. You've struck a balance between openness and shelter. Your mind flickers briefly toward the electric belt from Section 9, the laudanum bottle from Section 10, tools of progress and temptation. Yet tonight, the most powerful change is spatial. The room supports your rest. You close your eyes.
The mattress feels aligned beneath you. Your shoulders settle evenly. Your jaw unclenches. Outside, a carriage passes at a distance, but the sound disperses quickly. The open window diffuses it. Air absorbs noise in ways walls sometimes amplify. Historians still argue whether environmental control or internal discipline played the larger role in Victorian sleep reform. But here, in this carefully arranged space, the distinction blurs. Your breathing slows. The curtain lifts slightly, then falls. The air continues its quiet circulation. You feel less like someone fighting the night, and more like someone participating in it, sharing space with moving air, rising heat, dimming light. And as the room holds you gently in its redesigned embrace, you drift again, supported not by shock or scent or voltage, but by the simple geometry of a bedroom that finally knows how to breathe.
You begin to notice that your sleep is no longer a private battle. It is part of a larger cultural experiment. By the late 19th century, conversations about rest extend beyond bedrooms and into lecture halls, newspapers, and medical societies. A mainstream historical fact, industrialization reshapes daily schedules, compressing work into factory shifts governed by clocks rather than sunlight. Sleep becomes something to manage with precision. You feel this pressure even if you are not a factory worker. The rhythm of the city hums around you, trains arriving on time, offices opening at strict hours, schools beginning with bells instead of birdsong. The modern clock is a tyrant disguised as a tool. You glance at your mantel clock again, remembering how you moved it farther from your pillow. Its ticking is steady, impartial. It does not care if you are tired. It does not negotiate. In cities like Manchester and London, factory whistles slice through dawn air, synchronizing thousands of bodies at once. Even if you live elsewhere, the cultural influence radiates outward. Efficiency becomes virtue. You experiment with routine. You decide on a fixed hour for bed, not because you are forced, but because you choose to reclaim the structure. A quirky historical tidbit: before industrial timekeeping dominated, many people practiced segmented sleep, 2 shorter sleep periods divided by a wakeful interval around midnight. By the Victorian era, this pattern begins to fade in urban centers as continuous 8-hour sleep becomes idealized. You wonder which pattern your body prefers. One evening, you wake briefly around midnight. Instead of panicking, you sit quietly. The house is silent. The air from your carefully arranged window brushes your face. You resist the urge to consult the clock. Perhaps this pause is natural. You sip a small glass of water. You do not reach for laudanum. You do not strap on the electric belt. You simply exist in the quiet gap. After 20 minutes, or perhaps less, you lie down again. Sleep returns without drama. You begin to suspect that anxiety about wakefulness is often more disruptive than wakefulness itself. Victorian physicians debate how many hours constitute proper rest. Recommendations vary, but many advise between 6 and 8 hours for adults. Some caution against oversleeping, linking it to lethargy or moral weakness, an idea reflecting cultural attitudes rather than solid physiology. You smile faintly at that. Morality assigned to mattress time. You test another experiment, light exposure. You spend more time outdoors during the day, allowing natural sunlight to anchor your internal rhythm. A mainstream historical fact, while the term circadian rhythm does not yet exist in Victorian vocabulary, observers recognize that daylight influences sleep patterns. You walk in late afternoon light. You avoid heavy meals close to bedtime. You reduce stimulating conversation before retiring. The reforms feel modest, almost obvious, yet their cumulative effect is tangible. Meanwhile, public health reform continues to reshape cities. Sewer systems improve, water supplies become cleaner,
Overcrowded housing is gradually addressed through building regulations. Though imperfect, these changes reduce certain illnesses that once plagued urban populations. You sense that sleep quality cannot be separated from broader living conditions. If the air is foul, the water contaminated, the room cramped, no pillow can compensate. You reflect on how easily earlier generations blamed sleeplessness on weak character or spiritual deficiency. The Victorian era still carries some of that mindset, but cracks are forming. Science inches forward. You lie down at your chosen hour again. The window remains open a sliver. The curtain breathes. The mattress is aligned. The clock ticks softly from its new position. The difference now is subtle but powerful. You no longer dread the night. There is trust. You have gathered lessons from fresh air advocates, cautious doctors, architectural reformers, and your own quiet observations. You have discarded the more dubious inventions. You have adjusted your environment. You feel, perhaps for the first time, that sleep is not a battlefield, but a partnership. A carriage rolls distantly along cobblestones. The sound does not pierce you, it passes. You inhale. Exhale. The house is still. And as you drift once more into steady rest, you sense that the Victorian struggle with insomnia, dramatic, inventive, sometimes misguided, has led you to something surprisingly modern. Consistency, light, air, patience. Your eyelids grow heavy. The clock continues its measured rhythm, but it no longer commands you. You sleep.
You begin to understand that sleep is not only physical or architectural, it is social. Victorian society, for all its industry and innovation, remains deeply communal. Families often share bedrooms. Servants sleep close to kitchens or attics. In crowded urban districts, multiple people occupy a single room. Privacy is a luxury, not an assumption. A mainstream historical fact: in working-class neighborhoods of cities like London and Liverpool, overcrowding during the 19th century was common, sometimes with entire families sharing one bed. Sleep, in such conditions, is negotiated space. You imagine the difference. Your carefully arranged, ventilated room would be impossible in a tenement. Fresh air might mean a draft through broken panes. Silence might be replaced by street noise, crying infants, footsteps overhead. Insomnia, in those contexts, is less a medical puzzle and more an environmental inevitability. Yet even in more comfortable homes, sleep remains collective. The Victorian household adheres to rhythms that ripple through everyone. Bedtime for children, quiet hours for servants, lamps extinguished at certain moments. You notice how your own routine influences others, and vice versa. One evening, you remain awake longer than usual, reading by lamplight. A family member knocks gently, asking you to dim the flame. Light seeps beneath doors. It signals wakefulness. Wakefulness invites conversation. Conversation delays rest. You oblige. There is a subtle choreography to nighttime. Victorian etiquette manuals advise calm conversation in the hours before bed. Avoid heated debate. Avoid distressing news. The belief, part intuition, part observation, is that agitation lingers. You test this yourself. You avoid reading sensational crime reports before retiring. You choose something milder instead. The effect is noticeable. Your mind settles more smoothly. A quirky historical tidbit: some households believe that certain foods, particularly heavy meats or rich puddings, encouraged nightmares. While modern science frames digestion differently, the intuitive link between heavy meals and restless sleep holds some truth. You adjust your supper accordingly. You also observe the emotional climate of your household. Tension carries.
On evenings when arguments erupt over finances, politics, trivial misunderstandings, you feel the residue in your body as you lie down. Your shoulders tense, your breathing grows shallow. On evenings of laughter and shared calm, your transition to sleep is softer. Victorian moralists sometimes interpret this as evidence that harmony equals virtue, but you see it more pragmatically. Nervous systems respond to atmosphere. The social dimension extends beyond your home. Industrial life encourages evening gatherings, lectures, concerts, meetings. Gaslight makes it possible. Urban centers buzz long after sunset. In places like Paris and New York City, nightlife grows more vibrant in the late 19th century. Cafes, theaters, public halls. Sleep competes with stimulation. You attend an evening lecture once, curious. The hall is bright, the speaker animated. You return home alert, mind racing with ideas. Sleep comes late. You do not blame yourself. You recognize the pattern. Victorian physicians increasingly warn against excessive evening stimulation, especially for those prone to nervous disorders. Their language may be dramatic, but the advice contains a kernel of realism. The brain does not switch off like a lamp. You refine your boundaries, not isolation, but moderation. There is also the question of gender roles. Women, particularly in middle-class homes, often shoulder the emotional labor of maintaining household harmony. Men may carry workplace stress into the domestic sphere. Both patterns influence rest. You reflect on your own position within these dynamics. What expectations weigh on you? What responsibilities intrude into the night? Acknowledging them reduces their shapeless power. Another light joke crosses your mind. Perhaps the most revolutionary Victorian sleep aid is a calm dinner conversation. You consider servants, too, those who rise earlier than the family to prepare fires and breakfast. Their sleep is shorter, more fragmented. Industrial and domestic hierarchies shape who rests fully and who does not. Sleep, you realize, mirrors society's inequalities. But within your own sphere, you can still cultivate gentler rhythms. You dim lamps earlier. You encourage quieter evenings. You avoid contentious topics before bed. You take brief walks after supper to release lingering tension. You are not retreating from life, you are pacing it. As you lie down tonight, you notice how the house feels collectively subdued. Doors close softly, footsteps diminish, voices lower. The air moves through your slightly open window, as always, but now there is another current. Social stillness. Your mind, unprovoked by argument or spectacle, drifts more readily. You do not rehearse conversations. You do not replay confrontations. Instead, you feel woven into a shared pause. Victorian society may be rigid, hierarchical, industrious, but at night, even it must surrender. You close your eyes. The house exhales, and you follow.
You begin to notice something unexpected. Sleep has become quieter in your mind. Not perfect, not immune to interruption, but less dramatic. The Victorian century, for all its inventions and anxieties, gradually inches toward a more scientific understanding of the body. By the late 1800s, laboratories began examining fatigue, reaction time, and the nervous system with new instruments. While much remains misunderstood, a shift is underway. Sleep is becoming measurable. A mainstream historical fact: researchers in Europe start conducting early experiments on brain activity and reflexes toward the end of the 19th century, laying groundwork for what will eventually become sleep science in the 20th. You feel as though you are living in a hinge moment between superstition and science.
Not long ago, insomnia might have been blamed on moral weakness, indigestion of the soul, or invisible vapors. Now, ventilation improves, lighting evolves, daily routines are examined, emotional climate is considered, even architecture adapts. You think back to your earlier experiments, the open window, the rearranged bed, the abandoned electric belt, the restraint with laudanum, the gentler evenings. None of them were miracles, but together they formed a system. A quirky historical tidbit. By the end of the Victorian era, department stores begin selling standardized mattresses and bedding in greater variety, reflecting the idea that comfort can be customized. The industrial age that once disrupted sleep also begins offering tools to improve it. You appreciate the irony. One evening, rain taps softly against the window. You close it halfway, adjusting for comfort rather than principle. You are no longer rigid about fresh air. You are responsive. That feels like progress. You light a candle briefly and then extinguish it earlier than you once would have. You've learned that dimness prepares you better than brilliance. Your breathing slows naturally now when you lie down. There's less negotiation. You consider how far you've come, not in distance, but in understanding. Sleep is not conquered, it is invited. Victorian culture often frames life as a battle against disease, against poverty, against moral decay, against time itself. But rest resists combat metaphors. The harder you chase it, the faster it flees. You smile faintly in the dark. The mantel clock ticks, steady, neutral. It is no longer a judge. It is background. Outside, a late carriage rolls past. You register the sound without attaching to it. Rain muffles the city's edges. Your body feels heavier in a good way, grounded. You remember how once you lay awake cataloging every discomfort, the tick of the clock, the whisper of curtains, the distant wheels on cobblestone. Now those sensations blend into a single, tolerable atmosphere. There's a softness in that integration. You think briefly of great cities, of soot and gaslight and restless ambition, of laboratories and lecture halls, of factories and drawing rooms. The Victorian world thrums with energy. And yet, in bedrooms across that world, individuals lie down each night facing the same quiet requirement: surrender. You no longer fear the moment your head touches the pillow. If you wake briefly, you do not spiral. If you sleep deeply, you do not question it. You have stopped measuring every minute. Ironically, that is what gives you more of them. Another light joke drifts through your mind. Perhaps the greatest invention of the 19th century is not the steam engine, but perspective. Rain continues to fall. The air smells faintly clean through the half-open window. The curtain barely moves tonight, heavy with moisture. You roll onto your side. Your muscles release. Your thoughts loosen their grip. And in this quiet convergence of architecture, routine, social harmony, moderation, and emerging science, you drift again, not because you forced sleep into submission, but because you finally allowed it space to arrive.
You no longer think of yourself as someone who has insomnia. You think of yourself as someone who learned how to listen. The Victorian century stretches behind you now like a long corridor of experiments, some earnest, some misguided, some ingenious, some theatrical. Fresh air crusaders, electric contraptions, laudanum bottles, architectural reforms, social etiquette, industrial clocks, all of it circling the same quiet mystery. Why does the mind sometimes refuse to rest?
A mainstream historical fact, by the early 20th century, building on late Victorian research, scientists begin systematically studying sleep cycles, eventually identifying distinct stages of sleep. What was once moralized or mystified becomes observable. You feel that shift even if you cannot yet name its future vocabulary. Tonight, as you prepare for bed, there is no ceremony, no elaborate adjustment, just a sequence that has become second nature. Windows slightly open, curtains light, clock at a respectful distance, lamp extinguished earlier than habit once dictated, supper finished in moderation, conversation softened before nightfall. You lie down. Your body recognizes the pattern. The mattress holds you evenly. The air moves gently across your cheek. The house settles in familiar murmurs. You remember your earlier nights, tense, analytical, frustrated. You remember staring into darkness as though it were an adversary. You remember experimenting with belts and tonics, rearranging furniture in desperation, chasing perfect silence. Now you understand something simpler. Sleep thrives in conditions of safety. Safety in air, safety in light, safety in routine, safety in emotional climate. Victorian society, for all its contradictions, slowly discovered pieces of this truth. Public health reforms reduced environmental stressors. Architectural changes improved airflow. Medical caution began tempering excess medication. Social norms encouraged calmer evenings. Not perfectly, not universally, but gradually. You feel gratitude, not for any single invention, but for the accumulation of lessons. A quirky historical tidbit lingers in your thoughts. Some Victorians believed that placing a sprig of lavender under the pillow would protect against nightmares. Whether through chemistry or comfort, the ritual endured. You smile at the sachet still tucked beneath yours. Comfort and science need not be enemies. Outside, the world continues its steady march toward modernity. Railways expand, electricity spreads, cities grow brighter and louder. The coming century will bring even more stimulation. But you have learned something that will outlast fashions and devices. Sleep is less about control and more about cooperation. The rain has stopped. The air is cool but not sharp. Somewhere in the distance, a final carriage rattles home. You feel your breathing lengthen. There is no dramatic fade, no grand epiphany, just a gentle loosening. The Victorian experiment with insomnia does not end with a miracle cure. It ends with refinement, with the recognition that bodies respond to environment, that minds respond to rhythm, that rest responds to permission. You give yourself that permission now. The clock ticks, but it does not hurry you. The air moves, but it does not chill you. The house holds, but it does not confine you. You close your eyes, not in frustration, not in effort, but in quiet expectation. And as sleep arrives, steady, unforced, unremarkable in the best possible way, you understand that the true lesson was never about belts or bottles or blueprints. It was about balance. The night deepens. You drift. And this time, you do not chase rest. You welcome it.